Is it Carne de macello?
Ok, siamo live. We're live. Yeah. Allora, dovremmo essere live. Fatecelo sapere ovviamente in chat. Fateci sapere se sentite tutto. E direi, insomma, aspettiamo i vostri feedback. Intanto, ciao a tutte e tutti. Io sono Tiffany e oggi ho il grande onore di avere qui con me a chiacchierare su un'uscita di Mondadori, ovvero come c'è Juno Dawson. Intanto, hi, welcome Juno, welcome in our
Hello.
live.
Hi
Hello.
there. Hello.
È un grande onore e adesso ovviamente passeremo a una conversazione in inglese. Se avete domande da fare, ovviamente potete lasciarcele in chat così le recuperiamo verso la fine. E intanto io direi di iniziare con la nostra chiacchierata. So, okay, we're here and I'm switching to Italian. So, like less than a month ago, Carne da macello has it itself. Yes, and I also like it because it's rough in here, so I love it.
Tactile.
And I happen to be the translator of the book, and you know, let me tell you how much this interview means to me, because the weird thing about translating is that it feels like spending a lot of time both with the characters. Well, I think Jan is a friend of mine, and both with you, both with the author. It's super weird. And I feel extremely grateful and very lucky to be able to translate your books for the Italian market. And talking about markets, well, that
Mm.
was terrible, but okay.
Excellent segue.
Okay,
Nice.
great. Okay. And so, Meat Market, I think that Meat Market, it's a book of contrast, as I say it. You know, Yana's story is extremely ordinary. Seems like it at the beginning of the book. Her world is ordinary, friends, family, school, and then everything is turned upside down, and no one else is there to help her understand such big changes that happens in her life, and she ends up almost eaten alive in the fashion world. So the fashion world is flashing, it's glittering, it's wonderful, but it has an unusual ugly side, you know. So this contrast really hit me when I was working on the book. And how did you, or what did you wanted to put them together? How did you come up with the idea of the fashion world into a teenage ordinary story?
So I had always been fascinated by fashion, always. It felt like a very closed world that I didn't belong to. I'd been buying Vogue since I was a lot younger, and just really particularly kind of especially obsessed with the models because like you say, it looks incredibly glamorous. And I think, any woman or girl understands the sort of the power of beauty and that there is definitely kind of a currency to being beautiful. And I was really fascinated by that as somebody who, was still kind of early in my transition. And, I was kind of very interested in what that power is like. And I'd just done a book the previous year called Clean, um, which I believe is called something different in Italian. It's like called Tutti di Coppa or something in Italian. It's my fault. Is that right? It's called It's My Fault in Italian, I think.
It's tutta colpa mia.
Tutta colpa mia.
Tutta
Thank you.
colpa mia.
Thank you very much. Um, and that had looked at some of the similar themes about the contrast between a girl who is incredibly wealthy, but is also struggling with addiction. And so I liked those kind of contrasts. And to be perfectly honest, I was just really nosy. And this was an amazing opportunity for me to meet some models. And I reached out to some people that I knew, some people that I'd worked with. I'm not going to name names because I promised them I would
Oh,
keep them a secret. But I reached out to some models. I just DM'd some models on Instagram as well. and said, look, can I talk to you about your experiences in the fashion industry? And also because it was a YA book for teenagers, it was legitimately a story I could tell about a teenage girl, because a lot of models are still in school. So it just all worked. And as soon as I thought, I think there's a book in this, off I went. Um, however, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it.
Mm.
Even because Yana is not really the kind of main character, that drives the story herself. Like she's not leading her story. Her story like hits her mo most of the time. Like it's bigger than her. You know,
Hmm.
it really feels like a 16 years, 17 years old girl that is inside of this world. I don't know if there is a new regulation about fashion, but I don't think I want to get into that because every country, I guess, that they have different regulations, but still,
Hmm.
she is a 16 years old girl that is trapped into this world that is so much bigger than her
Hmm.
ordinary life, I guess.
And that's something that really interests me. You can't choose to be a fashion model. No one really chooses to be a fashion model. For one thing, you have to be 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot. Still, if we looked at Fashion Week that's just gone by in February, it has been commented by British Vogue and American Vogue that it was a lot of very, very thin women on the catwalks. And so the one thing that all the models had in common, with the exception of one who really did want to be a model, the others were kind of chosen and told, "Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, you should be a model." And they were kind of like, "No, I want to be a wrestler." And they're like, "No, no, no, you're really tall and really thin. You should be a model." And all of a sudden, when adults are saying to you, you could be earning sort of 800-900 pounds a day for just walking up and down in a straight line, of course you're going to do it. And you can only do it when you're young. And I think the fashion industry knows that. And that's the deal that Yana has to make, which is when she gets scouted on the first page of the book, she knows she can't think about it. She has to do it when she's young, because fashion is obsessed with youth. And so Yana is quite passive, certainly, and I would say the first 2/3 of the book, because yeah, she's drowning, basically. She's in a river, and it's just carrying her along.
Yeah, she's just trying to, survive somehow, and that's all she can do until, okay, the end that
Mm,
we're not doing any spoiler,
no,
but still.
no spoilers.
Um, Also, I'm a huge fan of Saba, so sorry, not sorry, but because she keeps Yana grounded, she keeps Yana uh, attached to her past life because when she's drifting away, Saba is her firmness. I don't know how
Mhm.
to describe it somewhere else. And I was wondering if you had someone on your mind while you were writing her character, or if you had the chance to have friends or sensitivity reader. I don't know, but.
Mm. So Saba is basically my friends. I think the novel that came before Meat Market, Clean, Tutakalpamia, was my first book that really, really did really well. My first novel, I should say, that did well. And it was a real turning point in my career. Certainly wasn't my first novel. I think it was my seventh, but it was the first one which each sold really, really well. And my life started to change quite quickly. I did my first world tour. I went to America. I went to Australia and New Zealand. I was in Italy that year as well. Um, and my life changed, and it changed really quickly. I kind of went from being fairly sort of unknown to being a lot more known. And it coincided that Clean came out the year after I started my transition as well. And so I was kind of becoming this kind of sort of voice of the trans community as well, which I found very strange. And, that was fraught with problems as well. And I'm very, very lucky. And I feel very lucky that I'm still friends with friends that I've had since I was in high school. And when I complained, or when I was acting, quote, diva-like. I'm very lucky in that I still have friends who are like, Juno, you are being ridiculous. Kind of like, you need to calm down. Like some people have real problems. And that's really important. And I think that's what Saba is. The character of Saba is based on the girls that I was teaching in my writing workshops. So for years, I think from about 2013 through to about 2017, I was working for a charity called First Story that puts authors in kind of disadvantaged high schools in London, and
Hmm.
the teachers select who they think are the most talented poets and writers, and then you basically just hang out with them for a couple of hours a week and just really encourage them to write from their point of view and say, look, we don't need any more Suzanne Collinses. We don't need any more kind of J.K. Rowling's. At least not J.K. Rowling. What we need
Well,
is, but what we need is you. And actually, Saba, there was literally a girl called Saba, and I asked her if I could use her name because I just thought it was such a cool name. She actually spelt it differently, but I said, "Look, I think your name is really cool. Can I name a character Saba?" And she was like, "Yeah," and yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around young Muslim women, and this notion was not the girls that I were meeting in London who are just young Londoners. And that's why I really wanted Saba to go in. But in terms of the role she plays in Yana's life, that's based on my friends.
oh, great, great. I knew because it feels like there's love about this character that
Mhm.
emerged from the book. I'm sure of it,
I
and
love her.
and
I love her.
I love it too, like so much. And I also think I forced every single one of my friends from the Balkans to read Mid Market because some of the lines you used in the book about Jana's family and her unanswered questions, thoughts that she doesn't really know how to place in her life. They are very resonating for many people that have the same background of her parents. And for the story of Yana and her background, which roots back in one of the most forgotten maybe events of
Mhm.
our recent history, which is the war in the Balkans. Um, did you have a particular inspiration on your mind? Is it something that you just, I don't know, wanted to tell people about? I don't
Mm.
know, because I really feel like maybe right now that we are in wartime, and I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but I've heard a lot of people in Italy saying it's the first war in Europe since the Great War, but it's not really like that. There is this thing that no one talks about.
And I think that's because certainly in the UK, people don't really understand it, and because it's an incredibly complicated geopolitical situation. Whereas I think the current crisis in Ukraine is it's easily understood. It plays well for the news. Whereas trying to get the British people to kind of understand quite a complicated genocide in the Balkans, even in the 90s. I mean, I was super young when that was
Yeah.
unfurling. I would have been 8, 9, 10 years old. I do very clearly remember it because my grandparents every single year without fail used to holiday in Dubrovnik. And when war broke out in the former Yugoslavia, there was, you know, all of a sudden, like within weeks, just everything changed, kind of. And obviously, things are very different now. But the reason that I wanted Yana to be part of a settled migrant family was because of the rhetoric around migration in the UK was trash. And if you think that, if you think, so I don't know how much Italians know about Brexit, but if you think I was writing this novel in 2016 and 2017, which was when the rhetoric around refugees and migration was being used in the UK to convince a populace that this was something that they should be really concerned about, and this is why we should vote for Brexit. I've made my feelings about Brexit very clear. I think it was deranged, and it has in no way improved the lives of anyone within the United Kingdom. And at the moment, our government, our failing government, basically, are very, again, they're doing the same thing. They want British people to be worried about refugees, migrants, trans people. It's all the same witch hunt. It's all the same scaremongering. And at the time when I was writing Meat Market, it was really, really bad. And so I wanted to say, especially as somebody who's living in London, I wanted to say that we are surrounded all the time by migrants, by second generation, third generation, fourth generation migrants, and refugees. And the version of refugees that you're reading about in our press is just not true. Migrants are the heart of the United Kingdom, because wherever you live in the world has migrated, and so I wanted, and particularly why I chose a family from the Balkans was because I wanted to kind of say, you know, what you've forgotten this chapter, and you've forgotten that, there was, at various points in British history, there have been times where people have needed to come here and we have been able to offer them a home, and they are settled, and this is their home now as well. And so, and again, Yana was very much based on a girl who was in my writing workshop as well. There was a slight difference in that the girl that she was literally based on was actually Argentinian. So I took some creative license and kind of moved to a different part of the world. But the groups that I was teaching in London were diverse, and not just in terms of sort of racial diversity, in terms of sort of geographical diversity. And I wanted to represent that. These kids were meant to be from London.
And I think that Jana is a true Londoner in her spirit, but still there's something that is not. I don't know. I know a lot of people from the UK, my parents too, or it's personal to me. So I don't know.
Do you know
I
what it
see
is?
that.
London
Sorry.
kids, I love the thing with London kids, and I love them, is because they have grown up in the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in Europe, if not the world. London is sprawling, it's a mess. But they're so streetwise, but they're also so sheltered, because London is so cripplingly expensive to live.
Okay.
You tend to very much stick in your little bit, in your little patch. So I set Yana and Saba and Ferdy, they live exactly where I used to live. I used to live on the Winstanley estate, which is where they live. And the kids who lived around me, they never really left the estate. They hung out, they went to the same chicken shop, they went to the same little park, they went to the same milkshake shop. There was one McDonald's. They all went, because if you get on a bus or if you get on a train, it's really expensive. So actually, even though Yana is a Londoner, she's actually very innocent in a lot of ways.
Yeah, she is, but she is because, as you said, when you're not a rich person in a big city, that makes your big city a lot smaller somehow. And,
Hmm.
um, it resonated because, different countries, but still, if you're not from a wealth circuit or your family is struggling, um, the the mechanism are very, very similar. So I guess in Italy too. So
Hmm.
that resonated much. Anyway, you wrote a trilogy about London, the London trilogy, Meat
Hmm.
Market, Clean, and Wonderland that hasn't come out yet. So they are all centered around teenager lives and extraordinary events that happens around them or to them. And you've mentioned this workshop that has given you maybe more prompts in terms of humanity and in terms of connections, but still, how do you keep these stories and these people real? And what do these three books have in common? Maybe if you thought about them just in one session, or they came one after the other.
So Clean was meant to be just a standalone. Like I wrote it, I was out of contract. I was bored of behaving myself. I was I felt like this sounds awful, and I'm not criticizing any other authors, but I really wanted to be shocked by young adult fiction. I really wanted something that felt confronting, and so that's where Clean came from. And at the same time, clearly Euphoria was being cooked up in America, so it felt like at the same time, I think we were having similar sort of feelings about everything. Just felt a bit polite. So Clean came along, and then obviously the publishers were like, right, what are we going to do now? I knew that I didn't want to do a sequel. As well as Clean had done, I felt Lexi, the main character in Clean, she had suffered enough. Like, I didn't want to put her through any more drama. And so I pitched Meat Market. I said, I think I want to do something about a young working class girl who gets swallowed by the fashion industry. And off I went and I started writing it. And because they're both set in London, and because Lexi was the kind of girl who would attend fashion parties, I suddenly started to see opportunities to just link them a little bit and just do little Easter eggs. So I just thought, right, that'll do. Right, these books are very separate. There is one character who links Clean to Meat Market. I won't say who it is, but so if you are really paying attention, you will see there is one character who appears in both books. And then by the time I finished that, Wonderland came along a little bit later. And by then I thought, what if there was a way to kind of close the circle? What if there was a way to kind of really kind of lock everything together? And so I sort of thought, well, we started, so I'll finish. And 3 felt like the magic number. But I didn't plan it. I never planned any of it.
Okay.
Like Wonderland came along by accident. Do you know, I'm not even sure what I was going to write, but it was when I was on tour in Australia, and I had a bunch of downtime in Melbourne, and there was an amazing exhibit about visual representations of Alice in Wonderland at the
Okay.
Melbourne Arts Centre. And, you know, Alice as a character is so culturally understood as a female that I was like, but what if she was a trans woman? And so I realized this was a way to explore the trans female experience through somebody that we all agree is a girl. And so that's what I wanted to do with Wonderland. So Wonderland came about a little bit differently.
Okay, that's great. Because seeing them together one after the other, it's quite, they are different. They are
Mhm.
different, but they maybe have the same kind of spirit. They want to investigate something that is not what you see at
Mhm.
first look. Maybe it's just that. And I'm jumping from one topic to the other, but you debuted last year with your first fantasy adult novel, Her
Mhm.
Majesty's Royal Coven. And let me tell you, is my favorite book of 2022, and
Thank
I'm
you.
dying here waiting for the Shadow Cabinet. It will be also soon released in Italy. Not don't know when, but it will be this year.
I'm so
But I
excited. I
adore
can't wait.
I adored it because it's such a fun story to read. But it was very different from your works in the past. Well, not all of them, but many books from your past.
Mm.
So, how was it? How was the process? How do you come up with? Well, I have my theories that I will tell you later. But how did you come up with the idea? What did you want it to tell? Because it feels like a very urgent book. Like
Thank you.
I don't know, maybe this is the impression.
Yeah, so that's another one. So weirdly, another one which started life in Australia. It's funny when you are on tour and you are in hotel rooms, I do a lot of great work because you're kind of bored, you're away from your friends, I guess looking to be inspired. And so when I was in Australia in 2018, I just jotted down on my laptop, right, Desperate Housewives, but they're witches. I knew I was starting to think at that point that I needed to tell some stories about adults. My life had changed a lot. Was with my fiance. I, was looking to buy a house. These are all very grown up things that just do not work in young adult novels at all. And so, and my friends as well. So I'm 40. My friends are roughly my age. So it was kind of like I knew I wanted to write about sort of women in their 30s and the kind of issues that kind of were starting to affect us. Um, and then the pandemic hit, and I was just so not coping. I was so miserable. And my husband, as he is now, was just like, you need to just write what you want to write. Kind of what do you want to do? And I said, I want to kind of do like a book that's like the Spice Girls meets the craft. And so that's what I did. I wrote the Spice Girls meets the craft in, and I had the best fun. And when I say that, that novel got me through 2020, and it really did. So yeah, thank goodness for that book, because it really kept me going.
Yeah, the Spice Girls after the split that reunites. It totally resonates, and I've also seen a couple of, we are writing what we want to write about witches and our magical witches. I see that in every line I wrote, like, these are our witches, the witches no one wrote about. So I saw that. Eh, No, no, anyway, and we're waiting for the sequel. The sequel, I'm really convinced.
It's
Anyway,
soon. Yes, it's
soon,
coming.
soon it will come. Okay. Yeah, as I said before, as I mentioned, you're very prolific as a writer. You've written like in 11 years in the industry, you've written like more than 20 books,
Mm.
essays, etc. Like it's so much. I struggle a lot with writing an email, and you write
Oh, me
25
too. Oh, me
books.
too. Well, that's why, because I ignore my emails. That's how I've written so many books. I just
I do
can't
that
answer
too. I
emails.
hate
So
that. Anyway, how do you find these stories? Like, how can you keep yourself inspired and creative? Aside from,
mm.
traveling to Australia, that seems like the land of inspiration.
I think, do you know, it keeps me sane. I'm happiest and I have the best mental health when I'm writing. I think, I remember being a really, really small child. And even before I could read or write, I loved books and I loved telling stories, and I would make up stories with my toys. So I've always been a storyteller. And it does, it's been actually the last couple of weeks I've kind of blocked out everything and just actually made a start on the third Her Majesty's Royal Coven book. And I feel so much calmer. I mean, yes, on one hand, I am just making work for myself because I'm ignoring emails and ignoring everything. But um that's when I'm happiest. I think I've always had a head full of ideas. Um I have more ideas than I will ever have time to write books. And I think that's why when I read Stephen King's book on writing, and I suddenly realized that, oh, he feels the same, and I realized that there are just people in this world who just love coming up with nonsense in their heads. I think I've also done well the last few years. I've split my time between writing novels and working on TV development. And so that's been really good as well, because I can take some of the ideas that haven't become novels, and we can kind of sort of turn them into TV gold. But yeah, no, I think it's all about what ifs. What if the Spice Girls were witches? You know, what if a socialite went to rehab? What if a girl from London became a model? And then it's just about whether or not you want to spend 2, 3, 4 years thinking about those characters. Like, here we are, we're still talking about Meat Market, and I think I wrote it 5 years ago. So
Yeah, because it,
mm,
it just come out in Italy,
yeah.
but yeah, it feels like it was written yesterday, really, because I have so many references in the books,
Mm,
the pop culture reference that are still relevant right now. So
mm.
I feel that it really sounds resonating, but that's very inspiring, I guess. The
Yeah.
what ifs sometimes are just yeah, but maybe I don't want to write another story, or do I really want to write another story? But the enthusiasm that this story have and keeps having for you, it's great, I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
Meat Market was the only book that I've quit. So I did quit Meat Market in, I think, probably late 2016. I had written the first kind of half of the book, and it was making me really miserable because, without getting into big spoilers, Yana, our young model, is assaulted by a figure within the fashion industry. And obviously, I knew that was going to happen at the beginning. And so I set out knowing this was going to happen. And Yana's such a lovely girl that I just felt so depressed about, you've created this lovely girl and then you're going to sort of subject her to this ordeal. And I just quit. I told my agent that I didn't want to do it. And I actually said I wanted to do a fantasy novel. I wanted to write like something a bit like The Wicker Man, but for teenagers, like it's a bit Midsummer kind of vibes. And my editor at the time was like, absolutely not. Like, we don't want a horror novel, please. And I was like, but this is a horror novel. This is really awful. And so I kind of went away for a bit. And then in the time when I quit, the whole Harvey Weinstein scandal happened, and Me Too happened, and women started coming forward. And I realized, do you know what? You've got to finish this book. You have to, because what wasn't happening is people in the fashion industry weren't really being called out. And I was like, fashion has a problem with predatory men. So I think you need to do your little bit. And especially because the actual models had shared their experiences with me, I think I sort of owed it to them to actually finish it. But Meat Market, it very nearly didn't happen. I did quit.
Almost, but you did.
Almost.
No, no. Yeah, yeah. I don't want to say we are lucky that Me Too came out. Like, well, we are lucky that Me Too came out because, it
Yeah.
had
It was,
such
oh,
an
yeah.
impact. Yeah, but it also made you finish the story. So, yeah,
Mm,
great. Um, and I guess that you meet so many readers and so many younger people, of course, that maybe that they see themselves in this story, and both your fictional and non-fictional writing navigates through so many pressing issues such as mental health, gender,
mm,
sexuality, interpersonal relationships. That I guess is the hardest things to have a life. Plus, how do they impact, or what is your feedback about this story? How do these people react? Because I guess it's fascinating to see these
mm.
stories through their eyes, but not just the stories, maybe this conversation through their eyes.
Yeah, sometimes I don't think, with my fiction, I don't think I've ever really set out to kind of, sort of like have like a message or anything, because I think it's more important to start with the story and all the characters, and then along the way you sometimes see opportunities to talk about the world. And I always say that I live in the same world as everybody else. I am reading the same newspapers, I'm seeing the same injustices, and I think there is something about seeing injustice that it's infuriating, and sometimes you can feel so powerless to do anything. But like, I can do this one thing, like I can write books, and I'm very lucky in that I've been given a platform to write books. And initially it was with my non-fiction. So in Italy, there is This Book Is Gay, and more recently This Book Is Trans. Um, those books, within a couple of years, readers started to tell me how helpful they had found those books, and that was really amazing, because with those books, I wrote them really hoping they would just find the readers that they needed to find. um I knew that those books would have benefited me when I was younger. Um, and it's a big responsibility. It feels. it feels like a lot. But at the same time, I feel I'm very proud to be part of that. I think I don't think he'd mind me saying this. Obviously, on Netflix, there's Heartstopper. I know Heartstopper is huge everywhere. I'm assuming it's huge in Italy as well.
Yeah.
And I was
Not
at,
as much as in England, but it's still
I mean,
huge.
Heartstopper's massive.
Yeah.
And I was at an awards ceremony in London the year before Heartstopper came out, and I met the Heartstopper cast long before the show was on Netflix. And Joe Locke, who plays Charlie Spring, sort of came rushing up to me and said, "Oh my God, this book is gay. You know, it was the most amazing book. You know, it really, really helped me when I was younger." And I was like that really it blows my mind. You know, it's still 11 years later, it really blows my mind that anybody has ever read any of my books. So if they have spoken to the reader in some way, that's a bonus. But more than anything else, I just hope they enjoyed it. Still, I read for fun, and I really, really hope that my readers are getting enjoyment out of these stories as well.
Oh, great. That's great. Uh, you've you've just said that it's a huge responsibility, and you're also a very visible person for these issues, especially in the UK. And I guess the situation is quite different from Italy. We have different issues, but they are on the news every day in the UK, and these are very pressing. And I guess um, this is a responsibility, but it also has the chance to change things. That I guess that it's very, very important, and yeah, again, a responsibility, but still, it feels like when they're talking about these issues, they are far away, like detached from reality, like we are talking about gremlins and not about people. No, that is something that makes me so mad because it feels like they are talking about, uh, something that doesn't exist because they never met someone, I don't know, but it really makes me mad. But it feels like when you're there in front row to talk about these issues, you're like, hey, we are here and we
Mhm.
need to discuss about my life, my things that are your life and your things. And I guess that I don't know. How does it feel like? How does it impact you? Maybe not really on a personal level, but more on a visibility level, which is huge, I guess.
It is. It's really hard, and I'm very, very aware of my privilege. I'm a white, self-employed transgender woman. I own my own house. I'm married. You know, my family are very supportive. So I'm aware that even as one of the most privileged trans women in the UK, I still find it incredibly difficult to live in the UK at the moment. And that is because we have a very far right government and a very far right media. And again, they want British people to focus on trans people rather than the real problems which have been caused by the government. You know, they've been in power for 13 years, so there's nobody else to blame, you know. So it's a it's a it's a scary time. But again, I think that there is, because of the position that I'm in, I do have this ability to be able to do things like this. You know, I can talk to people and I am listened to. And so the most important thing is that I just keep talking. And I've seen this all before. You know, any queer person remembers what it was like in the 80s and 90s, you know, when there was this real kind of like, oh my God, Ellen's a lesbian. Oh my God, you know, will Ellen be a lesbian on television? Should kids be watching Will and Grace? And so you know what this is like. You know, we've seen this before. You know, I remember how scandalous it was when George Michael came out. You know, it's non and in time, through sharing stories about gay and lesbian people, eventually the world kind of became familiar with gay and lesbian people. Even if you didn't know a gay or lesbian person in real life, you saw them on television, you saw them in news shows, on documentaries, in dramas, in comedies. And eventually you just start to realize, oh, you know, they're just people, just humans. And I think you're very right. At the moment, the trans community is being talked about, like you say, as if we're aliens, or gremlins, to use your example. It's like we're being talked about as if we aren't quite human. And when you start to talk about minority groups as if they're not human, that's really dangerous. And all through history, we have seen what happens to minority groups if they are dehumanized, whether that's Jewish people way back when or even now. What the way it's dehumanizing is incredibly dangerous, and that's my big fear for the trans community. And we're seeing this in America at the moment, where we actually have politicians calling for trans people to be erased from life. And trans people are just people, so you're calling for the erasure of people, and everyone should be really scared about that. Everyone should be scared about that.
Yeah, because tomorrow they'll be coming for you as someone else every day.
Hmm.
It's the phrase in Italy after the war because we know it very well. But still, we have so much time to waste on the lives of someone else that we don't know of anything about. Well, I don't want to get too angry about. Anyway, don't feel obliged to reply, of course, but you mentioned the US, and I guess that I think you're the first author I get a chance to meet and chat that has faced a ban. Banning books is something that it's quite unthinkable in my country. Been there and done that. That's why it's
Mhm.
unthinkable. And it feels such a huge reactionary way to deal with a publishing market
Yeah.
that is changing as
Do
much
you know,
as the
as
readers,
yeah, as we speak
Um,
right now, like right this very second, in a place called Hillsborough, right now in America, there's a huge meeting about whether they should remove This Book Is Gay from a middle school. And I just feel powerless. I feel a million miles away. I feel so bad for the teachers and the librarians. I can see there's pictures on Twitter. There are hundreds of people in this big hall, all fighting about whether they should take my book out of the middle school. Now, if middle school is the same as in the UK, that means there will be like 12 and 13-year-olds at that school. And I think 12 and 13-year-olds are asking really big questions about their identity, and even if they're not, their friends might be, their parents might be, their cousins, brothers, and sisters might be. And, every book I write is designed to encourage compassion and empathy, and that people would try to ban those books is really sad. I mean, I've never said any of my books are for children, and I would be the first person to agree that. Oh, with the exception of my picture book, but it's this isn't about the book. Let's be very, very clear.
no, of
This is
course.
about organizations who are trying to make a point about LGBTQ lives. But because you can't ban an LGBTQ person, you have to go after a book. And at the moment, book banning is a very particular tool of the far right in America. And again, for the same reason that I said before, we need to be very, very mindful of what this is really about.
Yeah, totally agree. They're trying to raise our culture so that they can be, yeah, they cannot openly erase these people. They do. They
Mm.
do because, we see it every day how they do it. But they're trying to ban the culture, to raise
Mm.
the culture that is changing maybe and making people lives
And it's
much
about
better.
choices. We live in a world where people should be allowed to make choices. No one is being made to read my books. Like, it's not, my books are very rarely on school curriculums. This is, they're trying to stop young queer people from having access to my books. If you don't like my book, you don't have to read my book, but don't stop other people from trying to read my work. It's just crazy. It's crazy, is what it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, it's not as crazy if we think all the things they are trying to do
Mm.
in the political system. Uh, but, but
Ugh, it's a
yeah,
mess. Mm.
it feels like we're back 100 years ago, with with these dynamics. Like it's super weird. It feels super weird. While
Mm.
the youngest queer community is very happy because finally they have what we didn't have back in the days. We didn't have well, a few books, but not as much spread as it is now. So I know it
Mm.
sounds crazy. It sounds
No,
crazy.
I mean, God, we could talk about it forever, but it's so dark. Let's move on.
Yeah,
Let's not. Let's talk about
exactly.
something
Let's move
happy.
on.
Quick. Let's talk about something happy.
Yeah,
Quick.
because we're almost at the end of our chat,
Mm.
but we have a question from
Okay.
Benedetta in the comment section. So you don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis, with whom I don't share Christian beliefs, but this quote always kind of struck me. The body has always been a challenging concept to me. In fashion, the body is all you are and needed for.
Mm.
For a lot of people, it's a traumatic burden. What is your relationship with the concept of a body? Is this something
Mm.
we can live with a good experience too?
Mm. So I wrote something about this for the Guardian, which is a British newspaper, and they did a big feature about women's bodies. And I was asked to write about my body, and I think again right now, we can't talk about bodily autonomy enough because bodily autonomy is under such threat through so many conversations around aging women, women with reproductive rights, and trans healthcare. There are so many conversations, and so I've always believed that my body is mine. And I think the quote that I said that, if my body is a ship, I'm its captain. And I don't know if I want to go into like witchiness and souls, but I just feel that my body, oh sorry, that's my phone being noisy, go away. I just felt like my body shouldn't be arbitrary, and nor should I let anybody else make decisions about my body. Now, when you speak to models, so to bring it back to meat market, when you speak to models, they they don't see their job as just being about the body. They do see themselves as performers. And I don't know if you've ever been in front of a camera, you'll know it is a performance. You are not just standing in front of a camera. You are really working to make art. There is an art to photography and an art to modeling. But the problem is that while the model herself can feel autonomy of her body, there are certainly a lot of outside influences having an opinion on that body. And that's where we get into a much more unpleasant side of our culture, which is, still that we still have opinions about women's bodies, I think, in a way that we often don't have opinions about men's bodies. I'm just reading a thing in the Daily Mail, ugh, trash, today about was it the Queen of Spain, I think, or the Princess of Spain? She has let her hair go grey. And the Daily Mail was like, oh, she's let herself go. And I was like, oh my gosh, no one is saying that about George Clooney or Colin Farrell. This is insane. And so I think the most important thing in the world is when it comes to your body is that you are the only person making choices about your body.
And that's the only thing that matters, I guess.
Mhm.
Not in fashion, not in fashion. I guess that in the last Milan Fashion Week, just one fat model walked the runway. Just one. Well, fat. It was like not so thin.
Mm.
Let's say that. So it was still.
And there's no
Anyway,
excuse. There's no excuse. British Vogue did call that out, and British Vogue were right to call that out. Edwin and in full. Basically, the next issue of British Vogue only has plus size models on the front because Edward was like,
okay.
This is a problem." Because it felt around the time I was writing the Meat Market, it felt like things were getting a little bit better in that we were certainly seeing more black models, more Asian models, more trans models, more fat models. And then it feels like it's actually gotten a bit worse. Progress is never a straight line, though, ever.
Yeah, yeah. In many aspects, I agree 100%. We have two more
Uh-huh.
questions. Are you writing something new now? But
Yes. So I'm working on some TV shows, which is very demanding. TV people want things done very quickly. So what this means is that there will be a gap between the second Her Majesty's Royal Coven book and the third. So you're fine because HMRC 1 hasn't come out yet. So you're fine. But in the UK, we're about to do, so I've got Shadow Cabinet is book 2. Oh, where is it? That's book 2. So that comes out in June. And then I've just this week started writing Her Majesty's Royal Coven 3. So that will keep me busy for the rest of this year.
yeah, great, great. Um, last question is just, they want your suggestions. How can we oppose these obscurantist trends we are facing today?
Sorry,
What's
say
you?
again.
How can we oppose this obscurantist trend we are facing today? How can we fight back, basically?
Oh, well, my opinion
Well,
on well, my opinion on this, and this was me and my girlfriends in the UK were despairing. After the last election, where it felt like things got worse. We were like, what can we do? Because we can't, as women, as queer people, as trans people, we can't expect our leaders to help. We're not going to get any help from government. So, what can we do in our local community to make lives better for women, queer people, trans people, poor people? So, we've kind of thrown ourselves into more sort of grassroots local organizations. So, I'm very involved in Trans Pride. We have a very political cabaret night called Club Silencio. My friend runs a community supermarket for people who can't afford food. Um, we're getting involved in local politics with our local party, the Green Party. And that's what I think we can do. So there are so many ways that we can make our communities better. And I think you can. It just might not be on a big scale all the time. But then look at Spain. Spain is undergoing such a cultural change. Where people said nope, and it feels like Spain is really rejecting the far right as much of Europe gets increasingly right wing. It felt like there are places never lose hope. Things changed. The culture changes, and even in my life, I've seen the system change, and you just, I think, on a personal level, you just have to keep working towards compassion and kindness and equality.
great. That's great. Um, so, I guess that I just want to thank you so much
Oh
for
no, thank
chatting
you.
with me. It's been incredible, amazing. I don't know, many times that while I was translating mixed markets, carne da macello in italiano, I was thinking so many things that I wanted to ask you about, but we don't have like 2 days to chat along. But still, thank you so much because it's been great to have you here. And if you want to just say something before we get off the live stream, I just remind everybody, vi ricordo che trovate Carne da macello in tutte le librerie, ovviamente di Juno Dawson, con anche la copertina più bella del mondo che è ruvida. E niente, here's your time.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you. I never ever really get to meet my translators ever. And it's kind of
Really?
never, well, no, because because like you were translating Meat Market years after I'd written it. So I was off doing something else. So it's honestly, it's such a lovely opportunity because, you spend as much time translating the work probably as I did writing it. So thank you so much. I think translators are very unsung heroes of the publishing industry. And it was always my dream to be published globally. You know, I come from a really poor family in Yorkshire near Melby. I come from where Melby came from. And when I started writing, I did want to be available in Italian and French. and Portuguese and Danish and, a million different languages. So basically, this is all part of one big dream. So thank you so much, honestly.
Oh, thank you. So you have an excuse now to come to Bologna or Milan. Like,
Oh,
I'm
loved
just,
Bologna. Loved Bologna. So I want to come to Bologna and Milan, of course. Yes, when it's not raining. The
great,
last time I was in Milan, the
great.
weather was horrible. So
No, we will bring the sun for you, of
thank
course. We
you.
can we
Thanks.
can arrange that. Don't worry. Anyway, thank you again, Juno. I hope that everybody is like getting crazy in the chat. So thank you again, and we can wait to have you live in here. So that's it.
Thank you so
So
much.
grazie a tutte e tutti per aver partecipato e direi che ringraziamo ancora Juno e ci vediamo alla prossima. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.